This episode of The Reality Check is brought to you by HelloFresh. Forget takeout. HelloFresh delivers all the ingredients for delicious, healthy meals anyone can prepare at home in less than 30 minutes.
Just before recording this week's show, there was a knock at the door, and it was a delivery from HelloFresh. It's hard to describe how cool it is to open up a box, and there are all the ingredients and step-by-step recipes for your next few meals.
And HelloFresh is giving our Canadian checkers 50% off their first order. Go to hellofresh.ca and use promo code REALITY50 to get 50% off your first order. That's hellofresh.ca, promo code REALITY50. This is your reality check.
Hi everyone, and welcome to The Reality Check, the weekly Canadian show that explores a wide range of controversies and curiosities using science and critical thinking. This is the show for November 29th, 2016, and I'm your host, Darren McKee. With me, as usual, Adam Gardner.
What's up, cuboids?
Christina Roach.
Hello.
And producer Pat.
Hi, everybody.
We have a great show for you today. A game from Pat, and then I'm going to talk to you about the 5-second rule. Should you eat that? But first, Adam, can we measure pregnancy in weeks instead of months? Which one's better?
Great question, Darren. On last week's show, I talked about ultrasounds in reference to the age of the fetus and progression of the pregnancy in general measurements of weeks. As a layperson without children, I always thought of pregnancies in terms of months, but it seems that this isn't really a great way to measure things. But why? So to understand exactly what's going on, we need to break down exactly what we mean by being pregnant for a certain amount of time. So quick question for the panel. When would you say pregnancy starts? Darren?
I would link it to something like conception. That seems to relate to when pregnancy starts. I also believe that might be hard to deduce exactly when that was.
Okay. Pat and Christina?
Yeah, so conception probably in theory, but yeah.
Christina?
Conception sounds like the most logical answer, but if I remember correctly, it was very tied to my menstrual cycle when I was pregnant.
Good answer, person who's been pregnant. So a couple of people mentioned conception, and conception is the time when the egg and sperm first meet. This is where it all starts, and this is a day that is actually quite difficult to nail down. A sperm can take anywhere from 45 minutes to 12 hours to reach the fallopian tubes. Further complicating things, sperm can survive in a woman's body up to 7 days. An ovulating woman can become pregnant up to a week after having had intercourse, if we're talking about conception. Determining the actual day of the intercourse which led to the pregnancy is perhaps something that parents who name their kids after the cities their children were conceived in pretend to do, but unless you have sex less than once a week, it isn't terribly likely that you know the exact date. Movies and TV shows often have this trope of who is the father. Sometimes only the mother knows, but sometimes if intercourse was had with different people over the span of a week, the actual parent may not actually be known. A DNA test or something of the sort would need to be done, unless there's significant physical differences between the fathers. So much to say, guessing at the exact day at which the sex which produced the baby occurred may not be an exact science. Guessing at the time of conception is potentially even more complicated. So, what can we use to measure this? Menstruation does not occur after conception. That's the whole point. Menstruation is what the body does when an egg doesn't get fertilized. It's a woman's body's way of saying, hey, it looks like you didn't get pregnant this month. Here's the egg that would have been a baby. This occurs roughly 12 to 14 days after ovulation. Ovulation being the time when the egg is available to meet with the sperm, which is conception. This is the actual event that is used to date a pregnancy. So a woman's pregnancy is dated back to roughly 2 weeks before conception, a week or two before the bout of intercourse, which led to that pregnancy. So it's the previous menstruation cycle before the egg that became the baby.
Does a woman have any say in this? Or the doctor's like, when was your last cycle? Therefore, it's this.
That's generally what they use.
That's pretty much it, Darren.
Yeah.
And when was the date of your last period? Okay, boom.
I didn't have sex for a week after that. Doesn't matter.
Well, it could be 2 weeks, right? Sometimes the periods can be irregular. So from this benchmark, the pregnancy will last 40 weeks or 280 days. And this brings a person to the estimated due date. This is the date on average on which the baby is due. More on that later. The estimation may be off, especially if the period is irregular, because the previous period is the reference number. If the period is longer than 28 days, the estimate is all off. So the age of the fetus will be reassessed at the first ultrasound based on the baby's size. So now the length of the term is measured starting at a date that has no significance because it's not even the date of the last period. So it's neither conception or the date of intercourse or sometimes even the date of the last period, just a day about 2 weeks before conception likely took place. But this does give an accurate estimation of the delivery day. This said, about 4% of women give birth on their due dates. How is this possible? Well, it's kind of a range. So we have about 60% of women giving birth from a week before to a week after their estimated delivery date, and 90% of women giving birth 2 weeks before to 2 weeks after that estimated delivery date. So why is the date so wrong? Think of it like the first snowfall. So we can use statistical modeling to predict when the first snowfall might be in a year, but that date's going to vary wildly from year to year. But it's always still going to average out around the same time. People aren't especially surprised if snow comes a couple days earlier or a couple days later on one year compared to another. But when it comes to babies, people are always a little surprised it does come on the exact due date.
I don't think they should be. But I guess they can't see the rest of the people that don't.
Yep.
Right.
96% of people don't have birth on the due date.
Oh, yeah.
I did not. I was a week late.
So, months versus weeks. A week is always 7 days. How many weeks are in a month? 4?
Oh.
Ish.
You're blowing my mind, Adam.
Right? A 40-week gestation is not 10 months. A month isn't 28 days. It's 30 or 31. Well, there's the one that's 28. It's 29 on a leap year. Does the 9-month term cover February? Well, most do. A quarter don't. So what's that baby's age in months? Now, it depends, and that's just because it's not an accurate measurement. A baby just doesn't gestate for 9 months, but 40 weeks. So where is a person measuring the months from, and how are they even converting it? Maybe the person's going backwards from the due date. Maybe they're going forward from that 2 weeks before conception date that they were using to measure in weeks. How are they doing this rough math? If they're just, dividing by 4, it's not going to be accurate at all. It's just not a very good way to do it. But the problem is, people aren't used to counting up to 40 weeks. So you count in days until maybe about 10. You count in weeks until about 7 or 8 weeks. You count in months till about 16 months. And then you generally count in years. I'm 38 years old, but I don't know how old I am in weeks or months. And that number, if I knew it, wouldn't tell me anything. I wouldn't have a frame of reference for it. Newborns are counted in months for a while, and then that runs out. So it's just sort of a practical consideration based on how people think. But medically, it's not really that useful. So there's a disconnect between how the average person sort of measures the passage of time and guesses how things go, and how the medical community needs to be specific. So your doctor's going to talk in weeks, and there's no real getting around that. So count it in weeks, or don't. I wanted my conclusion to be that you should use weeks, but you are human, and you'll probably do some sort of mental math to take a guess at what it is in terms that mean something to you, which is probably months anyway. So use weeks or months or the estimated due date, but just remember that the fetus is 2 weeks younger than you think it is, and that baby isn't that likely to be born on its due date, but it's less likely to be born on any other day.
Trying to see the distribution in my head, so it's like 3.5%, and then like 3%, and then 2% as it drops off. Maybe
I'm sure it's a perfect bell curve.
Perfect. Listeners, write in if you want to myth bust Adam.
Yeah, it might be like more before and less after, or something like that.
Yeah, what's the kurtotic level?
Yeah, you can have like a 2-month premature baby, but I don't think anyone gives birth at 11 months.
Adam, upon reflection, would like to revise his statement.
48 weeks.
It's a lopsided bell that you couldn't ring that easily, is what I'm trying to say.
I have a couple of comments. One, as far as timing, I know people often say there's certain months where it seems like they know a lot of people that have a lot of birthdays, but I know a lot of people that have birthdays in October, but if you count back, we're talking New Year's Eve. So I think that there's clumps based on certain holidays and that sort of thing. I know this is completely anecdotal, but definitely there's increased sexual activity certain times of the year in general in times like that. And I also wanted to say that I was horrified when I learned I was going to be pregnant for really 10 months plus instead of the ubiquitous 9 months that everybody talked about. I remember being actually quite angry that no one had been straight up with me, that I was looking at about 42 weeks of pregnancy. And
well, those first 2 weeks you weren't even pregnant.
Right.
Really, if you want to break it down a certain way, right?
Well, you'll find this really interesting because, to Darren's point too about, you just don't know when, you could be, what does early or late mean? In my situation, I had a due date and I was a week late, and because I was a week late, I was booked to go into the hospital to induce labor. So I did go into the hospital that morning. And so they're basing this on this kind of sketchy sort of system, if you know what I mean. Like, for me, luckily, I didn't have to take any drugs. They just broke my water, and there I went. But they're basing that exactly on this frame of reference that you're talking about. Mm-hmm. So instead of just waiting it out, mind you, our son was 9 pounds 14 ounces, so he was ready. He was ready to go.
Well, yeah, I think that's what it comes down to, right? Like, so the estimated due date may not be sort of an accurate date of when it might happen, but it is an accurate measurement of the age of the baby or the fetus at that time, right?
Yeah.
So if you're talking about a premature birth, well, that estimated due date is a very useful number, because knowing exactly how many weeks premature that baby is has a very big impact on exactly where it is in development. Mm-hmm. But for and then the opposite, for a late pregnancy or for a late birth, that baby's going to be big. I think that's kind of what becomes more of a concern. Like, oh, the baby might have hair when it comes out, or something like that, right? It might
or
have
a
glasses.
degree.
Baby might have glasses. That's great.
All right, here we go with another edition of everyone's favorite mostly guessing game, Name That. Earlier this month, friend of the show and frequent guest panelist, Jim Davies, took his Canadian citizenship exam.
Oh boy.
Congratulations to Jim on becoming a Canadian citizen.
Congratulations, Jim.
He posted that he couldn't say much about what was on the exam, but he did mention that he studied for it every day. So I wondered, how would the TRC panel do at a Canadian citizenship exam?
Oh, no.
Now, to be fair to you guys, I should mention that I picked some of the hardest questions I could find on a handful of practice exams. So we have 6 questions with a tiebreaker if required. As usual, I'll give you a piece of information, and then I'll ask you to name that from the choices provided. We'll rotate the order. I've randomly chosen who will go first. Question number 1. Which province was the first to grant voting rights to women for provincial elections? Darren, name that. Was it A, Quebec, B, Ontario, C, Nova Scotia, or D, Manitoba?
I feel I should know this. Manitoba.
Darren says D. Next is Christina.
I was 3 when I became a Canadian citizen, so I'm pretty sure I didn't have to take this test. But my parents would have. Crap. I'm going to say Nova Scotia.
Christina says C. And next, Adam.
I'm going to say Ontario, just because it's got big cities in it.
Adam says B. And Darren is correct.
Woo. Damn it.
The first province to grant women the right to vote was Manitoba in 1916. Quebec was the last province to concede the vote in 1940.
Wow.
Question number 2. With which words does the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms begin? Christina, name that. Is it A, Canada is a free country and home of the brave? B, O Canada, our home and native land? C, whereas Canada is founded upon principles that recognize the supremacy of God and the rule of law? Or D, Canadian citizens have certain rights and responsibilities?
A.
Christina says A. Next is Adam.
I'm going to go with D.
Adam says D. And lastly, Darren.
C, please.
Darren says C. And Darren is correct.
Whereas, y'all, that's how every legal document starts.
The Charter guarantees certain political rights to Canadian citizens and civil rights to everyone in Canada. Question number 3. On July 5th, 1916, the assembly of the number 2 Construction Battalion was approved. Adam, name that. This was Canada's first and only A, battalion consisting only of construction workers, B, all-female battalion, C, francophone battalion, or D, all-black battalion.
I'm going to go with C, francophone battalion.
Adam says C. Next is Darren.
That's a good question, Pat. I think I might pick C also, although one would think it would be Construction Battalion, but...
Darren agrees with Adam, and lastly, Christina.
Could you please repeat the name of the battalion to me?
Number 2 Construction Battalion.
I'd have to say francophone as well, C.
Everyone's in agreement with C, and the winner of this question is Pat.
Yeah.
Following the outbreak of the First World War, most black volunteers were turned away from enlisting in what they were told was, quote, a white man's war.
Wow.
The number 2 Construction Battalion was created after several appeals and protests to top military officials.
I almost chose that because I seem to remember some of that from Canadian history.
Me too. That was my second choice.
I did not remember any of this from Canadian history.
Question number 4. Darren, name that. Which Canadian province or territory is the largest in terms of land area? A, Nunavut, B, Ontario, C, Northwest Territories, or D, Quebec?
Good question, Pat. Damn Mercator projection system. Because you start going north and you're like, gee, that's bigger than the rest of the country. Quebec?
Darren says D, Quebec. Next is Christina.
My inclination is to say Quebec as well.
Christina agrees with Darren, and lastly, Adam.
Even though there's a lot of water, I'm still going to go with Northwest Territories.
Adam says C, and again, Pat's the winner.
None of it?
Wow.
Nunavut is number 1, accounting for 21% of the national land area. Quebec is number 2, accounting for 15%. Northwest Territories is number 3 at 13. BC is number 4, and Ontario number 5, with 10.4 and 10.1%.
Interesting.
I think the important thing is that I'm up 2 and the other people have 0, correct, Pat?
Darren is up 2-0, yes.
Don't get cocky, Darren. There's 2 more left.
Question number 5. In 1970, there was a major change to the Canadian federal election voting system. Christina, name that. What was this change? A, polling hours were extended, allowing people to vote in the evenings. B, personal identification became a necessity to vote. C, the voting age was lowered from 21 to 18. Or D, voting rights were extended to prison inmates.
What year was this again? 1960?
1970.
1970. Oh, we're talking Trudeau years probably. I am going to say C.
Christina says C, the voting age was lowered. Next is Adam.
I will say D, voting extended to prison inmates.
Adam says D, and lastly, Darren.
You know what? I'm going to go with D also.
Darren agrees with Adam, and Christina is correct.
Damn it.
Yes.
The voting age was lowered to 18. There was a private member's bill, C-213, introduced earlier this year, which is calling for the lowering to the age of 16.
Oh.
Really?
Going to the last question, I have Darren with 2, Christina with 1, and Adam with 0.
Yeah.
Adam, name that. What is the highest military honor a Canadian can receive? A, the Purple Cross, B, Badge of Courage, C, Order of Merit, or D, Victoria Cross?
I'm going to go with D, Victoria Cross.
Adam says D, and next is Darren.
So what were the first 3 again, Pat?
Purple Cross, Badge of Courage, Order of Merit.
Victoria Cross.
Darren agrees with Adam, which is pretty safe given that he's in the lead. And lastly, Christina.
I have nothing to lose, so I'm going to say A.
Christina says A, and Darren and Adam are correct.
Damn it.
The Victoria Cross is the highest military honor which is awarded to members of the Canadian Forces or allies serving under or with Canadian military command. It is awarded for, quote, extraordinary valor and devotion to duty while facing hostile forces. So congratulations, Darren is your winner.
Yeah, I figured he was going to win anyways, so...
Because I'm the most Canadian?
So I get my citizenship revoked? Is that?
Yeah, me too. I'm out of here.
Well, as I said, Jim had to study every single day to pass it, right? So
I'll be Skyping in from Portugal next week.
True. You know, these immigrants are coming and stealing our Canadian podcast jobs.
Right.
And this is the result.
So we'll play the tiebreaker just for kicks. Nova Scotia gets its name from Latin. Darren, name that. What does it mean in English? A, New Scotland. B, New Territory. C, New Land. Or D, New Star.
I'll go with New Scotland.
Darren goes with A. Next is Christina.
A.
Christina agrees. Lastly, Adam.
Well, since the French name is Nouvelle-Écosse, it is definitely New Scotland.
Yeah, good on all of you. Nova Scotia means New Scotland in Latin, although Scotia was originally a Roman name for Ireland.
No.
Have you ever dropped food on the floor and thought that as long as you pick it up within a few seconds, that food is still safe to eat?
Like today.
Every day.
There we go. Perhaps you go by the 5-second rule. If you can pick it up within 5 seconds, you're good. Other people might use a 3-second rule. Similar rules applied. Of course, still others think this was on the floor. It's dirty now. Why would I eat this? But what does the evidence say? Well, good old Wikipedia tells us of some of the early work, and this is a quote. In 2003, Gillian Clark of the University of Illinois found in a survey that 56% of men and 70% of women surveyed were familiar with the 5-second rule. That's just awareness. She also determined that a variety of foods were significantly contaminated by even brief exposure to a tile inoculated with E. coli. On the other hand, Clark found no significant evidence of contamination on public flooring.
Oh, great.
So apparently, if you're just out in the world, drop away.
Wow.
For this work, Clark received the 2004 Ig Nobel Prize in Public Health. A more thorough study, though, in 2006, using salmonella on wood, tiles, and nylon carpet, found that bacteria were still thriving after 28 days of exposure under dry conditions.
But like for salmonella to be on a carpet, I need to like drop raw chicken on it, pick it up, not clean it.
Yep.
And then, drop some chips on it a week later.
This is true.
Okay.
Or weeks later, though. That's, people
Yeah.
in a high traffic area, it could just not be the carpet. It could be part of the counter, right?
Yep.
Now, this, back to the salmonella, it was tested after 8 hours exposure, and bacteria could still contaminate bread and bologna in under 5 seconds. But a minute-long contact increased contamination about tenfold. But this was with the tile and carpet surfaces only. What they are trying to say is that the longer the duration, there was more contamination.
Did you say bread and bologna?
I did.
So this was done by like some graduate students.
Nice.
Let's not judge how people eat, Pat. They're not all lucky enough to get HelloFresh. As well, the show's Mythbusters and Food Detectives looked at the idea. Mythbusters found no difference between 2 seconds and 6 seconds exposure, but of course other factors matter. And Food Detectives found that bacteria attached immediately.
Wow.
There was even a study published in September in Applied and Environmental Microbiology, and they found little support for the 5-second rule. And this is a quote. We explored this topic using 4 different surfaces, stainless steel, ceramic tile, wood, and carpet, 4 different foods, watermelon, bread with butter, and gummy candy. Adam and I are happy with this.
Oh, yeah.
4 different contact times, less than a second, 5 seconds, 30 seconds, 300 seconds, and 2 bacterial preparation methods. Although we show that longer contact times result in more transfer, we also show that other factors, including the nature of the food and the surface area, are of equal or greater importance. Some transfer takes place instantaneously, at times less than a second, disproving the 5-second rule. End quote. Given all of that, I think we can safely conclude the 5-second rule isn't a valid rule, but just something people say.
Yeah.
But that doesn't address the larger issue. Are you being consistent with your food safety behaviors? Aaron E. Carroll wrote a great piece in the New York Times called, I'm a doctor. If I drop food on the kitchen floor, I still eat it. Carroll says that we're focusing on whether there are no bacteria on the floor, but that is the wrong thing. How does the floor compare to other surfaces?
Yeah.
He cites the work of Charles Gerba from 1998 that looked at how well cleaning products worked. They, of course, to figure this out, took baseline measurements first and found that, quote, the kitchen floor was likely to harbor, on average, about 3 colonies per square inch of coliform bacteria. This is linked to E. coli. 2.75 to be exact, per square inch. So there are some. But here's the thing. That's cleaner than both the refrigerator handle, 5.4 colonies per square inch, and the kitchen counter, 5.8 colonies per square inch. So basically, the kitchen counter and the refrigerator handle are twice as bad. We spend so much time worrying about what food might have picked up from the floor, we don't worry about touching the refrigerator. We also don't seem as worried about food that touches the counter, but the counter is just as dirty, if not dirtier. Mm-hmm. Carol says it is the same for the bathroom. Most people are concerned about the toilet seat, but it's cleaner than all the things in the kitchen at 0.68 colonies per square inch. So just to compare, the flush handle in the bathroom is about 35 colonies per square inch, the sink faucet is about 16 colonies per square inch, and the counter is 1.3 colonies per square inch. That's counter in the bathroom. Remember, that's back to the kitchen counter at 5.7 or the kitchen floor at 2.7. Mm-hmm. Additionally, there are many things people seem comfortable touching that are crawling with bacteria. Mobile phones, money, gas pumps, bank machines, computer keyboards. How often do you clean any of these?
Children, babies.
Sure, exactly. Infectious agents. So most people, they pay for food with money, and then they use their hands to eat the food. And the money is far dirtier than the food if you just happen to drop it on the floor. So the floor or toilet seat seems psychologically worse, but it isn't from a bacterial point of view. If you're willing to eat food from your counter, you should probably be willing to eat it from your floor. So thanks for joining us once again. Until next time, think better to act better.
Peace out, cuboids.
Stay classy, not smart-assy.
Apparently, go ahead and eat off the floor, folks.
You heard it here at TRC.
For show notes or to discuss this episode, visit our Facebook page and website at trcpodcast.com. For general inquiries or to send a topic or parody suggestion, email info@trcpodcast.com. Help support the show by leaving a review on iTunes and liking us on Facebook. Follow us on Twitter at TRC_podcast.
Outtakes.
And finally, the 5-second rule is bunk, but you should probably be okay eating it. Eating it anyway.
Eating the 5-second rule?
There you go. Well, pregnancy is no laughing matter, despite how the segment ended. Mm-hmm. But what is also fun is games. Who doesn't love games? We do at the Reality Check. And Pat has another one.
Darren, can you take that over in case I don't use any of that
Please.